Hi guys, this is Mitali Nikore, the founder of Nikore Associates, and I'm creating this video on Union Budget 21-22 in response to a lot of requests that I got on my direct messages and on social media asking for my reading of the budget and my opinion of the budget. So let me break it down for you a little bit to make it very easy to understand. In 2020-21, and I'm talking about pre-COVID, when we didn't know that we were going to be hit by this crisis, the total quantum of the union budget was around 30 lakh crores. And to give you some context of what 30 lakh crore means, it's approximately 1% of our GDP. So 30 lakh crores was the total quantum. Now, if we look at the revised estimates that have come now, post COVID, given all the additional spending that the government did last year, the budget stands at around 34 lakh crores, 34.5 lakh crores to be a little more precise. So basically, we can say that the government spent around 5 lakh crores extra over what it had planned at the time of budget 2020-21. And this was one of the biggest impacts of COVID in terms of additional government spending. Now, the total quantum of this year's budget, that is 2021-22, is actually very similar. It is around 35 lakh crores. So the total spending of the government over the last 2 years has only increased by 1%. That's the first figure I want to leave you with, that the total quantum of spending has increased only by 1% in response to COVID. And this is the government's first post-COVID recovery budget, but the actual spending has only increased by 1%. And the other point that I want to sort of talk about right up front, which, the finance minister obviously talked about in her speech, and this is something that was pointed out in the economic survey as well, is about the fiscal deficit. See, in the economic survey, there was this whole chapter which talked about and made a case for actually increased government spending, especially in the time of a recession and in the time when a lot of people and families require greater social protection, greater, income support from the government. There was a whole case that was made that yes, this is the time for the government to spend. And we can see that last year, yes, the government spent an additional 5 lakh crores, but this year it's the same actually. It has not been increased, and we are still sitting at 35 lakh crores. And the fiscal deficit has increased to 9.5% of the GDP. So, why is the fiscal deficit increasing so much? Actually, if we look at the last few years, and we look at the fiscal deficit in 2019-20, it was far above the target of 3% of GDP. It was actually 4.6% of GDP. That's what we've got from the estimates now. And the target for 2020 was to bring that down to 3.5%. But because of the additional spending of 5 lakh crores that the government had to do, it went up to 9.5% of GDP. Now the government is saying let's maintain that level of spending, and next year we'll be able to get the fiscal deficit down to 6.8% of GDP. How will it do that? Of course, because GDP itself will grow. And last year GDP contracted, so the fiscal deficit actually will become a greater proportion of the GDP. The quantum of the fiscal deficit, of course, did increase and will be higher next year as well. But the main reason we will be able to control our fiscal deficit as per the projections of the government is because of the increase in GDP itself. So this is the first point I want to make. This is the first story I want to communicate, that the total quantum of the union budget this year is 35 lakh crores. The fiscal deficit is 9.5% of GDP, and next year with growth in GDP, it is projected to reduce.